And let's look at how that happened in part 2, Opera Diva, Vanguard of Social Change. So, just as Théophile Gautier, a novelist inspired by opera singers, remember he was always pursuing all the greasy girls, helped to imprison women, women novelists, also inspired by opera singers, helped to free them. Both George Sand and George Eliot rejected the idea that the chief role of a woman artist was to give pleasure to men, and that her artistry was limited to her body. Both women were keenly aware of the power and achievement of opera singers. How, they wondered, could women who embodied such sublime music and routinely reduced thousands to tears be nothing but a second-class being and nothing but a body and a body to be exploited? And of course, this was not an academic question for them. I'm sure many of you know that both women had to use men's names in order to get their own work published. And they also both wore the bloomer trouser garment, which was a radical reform garment, to escape the restriction of the heavy skirts of the day. And in their novels, these proto-feminists come up with a new definition of the female artist. It's not based in her body, but in her mind and soul. A woman artist, they posited, has the highest, even a sacred calling. It's a moral role to use her artistry to make the world better. They actually reversed the centuries-old idea that the stage was a place for fallen women, and they flipped it. They said it's a place for women of the highest artistic and moral calling. The theater is not a sordid, shameful place, but a launching pad for social change, to change the world for the better. And they're actually, George Sand and George Eliot are actually part of a larger group of women. We'll be looking at Harriet Beecher Stowe in a minute, who are actively at this time, through their writing, striving for social betterment. And they saw women as having a really important and unique role to play in this high endeavor. And I'd like to take a moment to tell you about a woman singer, opera singer, who inspired both George Sand and George Eliot with their reforming ideas. And that is Pauline Garcia. Now, she was a very unusual diva for her day, both in her approach to her art, to her personal life, and her prominence in the world of music. She was unusual first in that she was extremely well educated in music and beyond. Franz Liszt was her music teacher. And she was the youngest child in the greatest opera dynasty ever. She absorbed all the teachings of her opera singing father and mother, her superstar diva sister Maria, her brother Manuel, who was the greatest voice doctor and voice teacher of the whole 19th century. And although she was in a performing family, she was extremely studious. She had a very reserved manner. By her teens, she was fiercely devoted to this idea of music as art with a capital A, just almost a vocation, a religious calling. And she had an intensity of purpose that really struck George Sand and George Eliot, and they all became friends. She was also unusual in that she was very small, dark-skinned, not considered attractive in the conventional ways of the day. And given all that I've mentioned to you, she was not a charismatic performer. She didn't drive audiences wild with jewels and deploy costumes. She was a connoisseur's performer who knew people who could tell the genius that she brought to her singing. And in fact, I should say that the Gautier camp really blighted her career. Remember his belief that a woman's power as an artist resided in her body, her beauty, and her sexuality. And so she never really had the great opera career that was her potential. But her power interpersonally, her power as a concert artist, and the friendships she made, you'll see will have extreme importance.